In 2015, Washington, D.C. firefighters responded to a seemingly average call about a house fire. But once they arrived at the house, which was actually a multi-million-dollar mansion, they discovered much more than they bargained for. 4 bodies more than they bargained for. The corpses found that day were identified as a 46-year-old businessman named Savvis Savopoulos, his wife, their 10-year-old son, and their housekeeper. Before I continue, let's just address this dude's name. Savvis Savopoulos. What a freaking epic name. All 4 individuals were all covered in puncture wounds, doused in gasoline, and appeared to have been beaten with a baseball bat as well. That's horrible. Clearly, this was out of the firefighters' wheelhouse, so they called their police friends to come check out the scene while they put out the fire. When the police arrived, they immediately declared everyone is deceased, except for the housekeeper. The housekeeper was given CPR and rushed to the hospital, where she passed away moments later. In their search, investigators found a baseball bat covered in vital fluid, a sword from Savvis's samurai collection, a box of half-eaten pizza from Domino's, and a hair. Like, how did we go from a samurai sword to leftover pizza to a single strand of hair? I'm interested to see how all of this connects. Based on the look of things and the evidence uncovered, officials determined that all 4 individuals had been held hostage in their own home for over 18 hours before being terminated and set on fire. So whoever did this to them must have known them, right? And I wonder what they had against all 4 of them, especially a 10-year-old little boy. Well, if you can't already tell by his name, Savvis Savopoulos was a baller. He was the CEO of a popular construction firm and had a lot of money. In fact, the house they lived in and were executed in was a $4.5 million mansion in a super wealthy neighborhood, like right down the street from the vice president's house. Aside from his booming business, Savvis was big into martial arts and made plans to open his own studio. He was also known for being a big supporter of the local Greek Orthodox church and even coached his kids' soccer games. Oh, and Savvis actually had 3 kids, but his 2 daughters were away at boarding school when all of this happened. Alright, so if Savvis was rolling in the dough and running a huge company, he definitely had a target on his back. But who would want to take out a super charitable, family-oriented man with a big heart? Apparently someone did. Let's find out who. So the house had security cameras, but all of them had been taken, along with their SIM cards. But those weren't the only cameras in the area. Officials were able to pull footage from a traffic camera in the area where they saw a man wearing all black run away from the house and drive off in Amy's Porsche. Later that afternoon, the car was located at a church parking lot about 10 miles away from the family's house, but it was completely torched. The next step in the investigation was to interview friends, family members, and co-workers of the Savopoulos family for more information. Here's what officials found out from Savvis's other housekeeper, Nellie. Oh yeah, Savvis had 2 housekeepers, so you know he made it big. Everyone should have a maid. Even the maid. So Nellie said she was with Savvis hours before the incident. They were about 25 miles away from Savvis's home at a martial arts studio he was about to open. While they were there, Savvis got a call from his wife, Amy. She asked him to come home because she wasn't feeling well and needed help with their son. Being a good husband and dad, Savvis immediately left to go help his family. But the housekeeper mentioned this was a bit odd of Amy to ask, because they typically had babysitters there to help with the kids when needed. Huh, that's interesting. I wonder if Savvis speculated anything when he got the call. Either way, something fishy is going on. When Savvis pulled up to his house, he probably didn't know it yet, but shit was about to go down. Cue the chaos. The night before the savage slayings, Savvis called Nellie and left her a voicemail. In the voicemail, Savvis told Nellie that Amy was sick and the other maid, Vera, was going to stay the night to help the family out. He said Vera's phone had died and she didn't have a charger. He asked Nellie to tell anybody that might be worried about Vera that she would be staying the night with them. After that, he told her not to come to work the next day and asked for her to send him a text once she heard the voicemail. All of this is so weird. First of all, why would the maid stay over and help the family instead of a babysitter? And why would Vera not be able to use Savis's phone to call her family if she really needed to? So Nellie didn't listen to the voicemail until the next day. But when she did, she thought it was super strange. She also got a text from Amy telling her not to come into work that day. Ugh. This is so sad because Amy and Savis are clearly looking out for Nellie, but at the same time, I wonder if they were sending her these messages also as a cry for help. But if that were the case, they should have been a bit more obvious. Like maybe toss in a subtle, "Help! I'm being held hostage in my own home." Is that too obvious? Maybe people should start creating code words with their maids for if they're ever being held against their will. Something like, "I need help cleaning the baseboards," because that would be so apparent something is up. Like, who cleans their baseboards? If I need a friend to help me get out of a bad date, my code word is, "Hey, help me get out of this bad date." It's very effective. All right, let's get back on track. So Nellie got all these weird messages from Savis and his wife not to come in, so she didn't. But the other housekeeper, Vera, wasn't blessed with that same fate because she was at the house and was apparently being held against her will. And I guess Nellie didn't reach out to Vera's family to let them know where she was because after Vera didn't come home that night, her husband got worried and stopped by Savis's house to look for her. Vera's husband told officials that when he got to the house, he saw the Porsche parked outside and assumed the family was home. But no one answered the door when he knocked. Then Savis called Vera's husband and told him Amy was at the hospital and Vera went with her. Also, why would the housekeeper randomly be doing so much stuff outside of her job requirements? Like, why didn't anyone else raise an eyebrow when the family said this woman was going to spend the night and then accompany Amy at the hospital? If that's the case, homegirl needs a promotion. Vera's husband later told investigators that he had a feeling somebody was inside, but he left. He was so close to possibly saving 4 lives. So another person who officials talked to was Savis's assistant. He had some super steamy tea that turned into a solid lead for the case. The night before the big event, Savis called and left his assistant a voicemail asking him to go to his office the next morning for a package. The assistant was then directed to meet with the chief financial officer of the construction company, who gave him $40,000. Yeah, that's not sketchy at all. After that, Savis texted his assistant and told him to drive to his house and leave the cash in the seat of Amy's Porsche. In what world is this a normal task for the assistant? Like, how was he not more suspicious about taking 40 G's out of his boss's bank account and dropping it in an empty car with no one around? And does that mean he was at their house when the family was inside being held against their will? This is wild. Later, investigators made the connection that where the charred Porsche was found was also right by the apartment complex Savis's assistant grew up in. Ooh, so maybe it was the assistant, and he's trying to make it look like someone else did it? But the assistant said he never saw anyone during his money drop exchange and ended up having an alibi. Okay, so it's back to the drawing board for investigators. They turned back to the evidence they had: a baseball bat, a samurai sword, half-eaten pizza, and a sketchy strand of hair. Since the pizza had a few bites taken out of it, investigators swabbed a slice for DNA and ran it through their national database. And they found a match. It was a 34-year-old man named Darren Dellen Dennis Wint. Dang, say that 10 times fast. Darren Dellen Dennis Wint. Darren Dellen Dennis Wint. Darren Dellen Dennis. So since Darren worked for Savis, he definitely knew this man had money. And if he was fired, well, there's the motive. And based on his criminal history, he was clearly capable of holding his rich ex-boss captive and scamming fat stacks of money from him before whacking him out alongside his wife, son, and housekeeper. Investigators started looking for Darren, but they had no luck. Then they got in touch with his dad, who said he would call his son for them. When Darren answered the phone, the detectives got on the line and told him to turn himself in by either calling 911 or finding an officer. But instead, he made a run for it. Well, duh. What kind of officer thinks calling a mass executioner and telling them to turn themselves in is a smart idea? Like, they really couldn't have been more secretive about tracking him down? Not smart. Well, a week after the initial incident, officers were able to track down Darren on the road. They pulled him over and searched his car, where they found thousands of dollars in cash. Since he had the cash with him and DNA evidence tied to the scene, that was it for Darren. He was arrested and given a trial date. Here's how investigators theorized the whole thing went down. Savas was at his martial arts studio, and Amy was at their mansion with their son and the housekeeper. Darren broke into the mansion and forced Amy to call Savas and ask him to come home, so she did. After Savas came home, Darren made his ex-boss reach out to his assistant to coordinate the money drop. Officials concluded that Darren beat all 4 individuals and held them hostage for around 18 hours. But before icing them out, he ordered a pepperoni pizza from Domino's. And he used Savas's credit card. Damn, this guy is savage. It's already bad enough that he ordered a pizza in the middle of such an awful event, but to use the victim's credit card? That's just plain rude. And did the pizza delivery dude not notice any of this was going on when he dropped the za off at the crime scene? It is blowing my mind how many people went up to this house when 4 people were inside being held against their will. First the assistant, then Vera's husband, and now the Domino's driver? That next morning, Vera's husband showed up and left. The assistant popped by and left the cash in Amy's Porsche. Darren wiped out everyone in the house, doused everything in gasoline, set the house on fire, and fled the scene in the Porsche. After that, he abandoned the car and set that on fire too. That is so messed up. And why did Darren want Savas gone so bad? I understand he may have been frustrated about getting fired, but that was 5 years ago. And even if he was mad at Savas, why bring his poor wife, son, and housekeeper into the mess? Darren didn't go to trial until 3 years after the big event. Prosecutors initially believed Darren didn't act alone, but he's been the only suspect connected to the crime. Darren tried to pin the executions on his 2 younger brothers. He said they tricked him into going to the house and leaving his DNA on the pizza crust. Damn! He just did his brothers so dirty with that. And it still makes so much more sense that the guy who was fired by Savas would be more likely to attack him than the brothers. Also, what happened to bro code? Darren's attorney told the jury that Darren was a nice person and didn't seem violent when he represented him in earlier cases. Dude, isn't that your job to have your client's back? Of course you're gonna say he's nice, but also, didn't he have previous assault charges? Oh, and get this. The attorney also said it couldn't have been Darren because he didn't like pizza and apparently never ate it. Okay. That is 100% a lie. Who doesn't love pizza? And why would his DNA be on the za if he didn't eat it? Well, the jury found Darren guilty for all slayings, and he was given 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Darren recently tried to request a new trial because he's still saying his brothers did it. He's still holding on to that. The proof is in the pizza, bro. We know you did it. And both brothers had an alibi. But Darren's lawyers claimed one of the brothers' alibis wasn't so solid. He claimed he was at a friend's house watching a YouTube music video, but one of the girls who lived at the house he was reportedly at said he would call or text before stopping by, but his phone records show no texts or calls between the two, until days after the slayings. Yo, that is such a stretch. Darren's lawyers are really out here hustling for anything to get him out of jail. I think the brother clearly had to be telling the truth, because how do you make up such a specific alibi like that? As of now, no further advancements had been made in Darren's claim, and he's still in jail. One thing I don't understand is why didn't Darren get Savas to request more money than $40,000? Like, if he's gonna go through all of the trouble of holding 4 people hostage and slaying them, you'd think he'd do it for a bigger return, right? And if Savas owned a $4.5 million mansion, Darren probably could have squeezed out a few more zeros if he really tried. Wait, you wanna know what I just thought about? The daughters. Yeah, Savas and Amy's 2 daughters were at boarding school when all of this happened. They definitely dodged a bullet, but I bet it was so brutal to find out about the whole thing. Well, that about sums it up. If I could give you one piece of advice from this story, if you want to cover up a crime, you better have a good plan. Or just have a butter cookie. Thanks for watching.